1947年トルーマン大統領以来、歴代大統領と各政府機関の最高責任者で構成され、今なお活動を続けているとされる MJ-12 とは一体何か。 UFO 現象、地球外生物における様々な情報を操作し、決してその存在を明らかにしない MJ-12。 真実を知りながら平然と地球を操る男たちがそこにいた。 MJ-12 発足当初からより親密な関係にあった CIA 長官、その要職にかつていた第41代合衆国大統領ジョージ・ブッシュ。彼は1989年7月、突然火星への有人飛行を言明。今なぜ火星なのか。そんな彼を中心に活動を続けているとされる MJ-12 を過去のあらゆる資料、データをもとに今ここに再現。真実が明らかにされる時が来た。国家の安全を図るため、これから述べることは国家の機密事項を劇的に描いたものである。また我々はその機密に関して政府高官からの指示に従い協力するものである。しかし我々は来るべき将来起こるであろう未知からの挑戦が何であるのかを知る権利があると信じている。地球は世界統一、自由、平和への望みを持てる時代に到達した。21世紀が我々を取り巻く宇宙と意志の伝達を図る時代であると言えるのだ。
So, ladies and gentlemen, now we're just going over a contingency plan for South American elections.
Gentlemen, let's get down to business. The purpose of this meeting is to bring the President up to date on the activities of the MJ-12.
Before we start the meeting, I'd like to introduce the minister, who most of you already know. I've invited him to attend this meeting for the first time to get the religious viewpoint on the matter of UFOs and extraterrestrials.
Mr. President, now, as you know from the time you were a member as director of the CIA, the Majestic 12's top secret charter was to gather, disseminate, and present to the President evidence of worldwide contact with UFOs. We've all been handpicked to evaluate the ramifications of contact with the extraterrestrials, to answer the question, who are they and why they're here?
Gentlemen, proceed.
On June 24th, 1947, a civilian pilot flying over the Cascade Mountains, that's in Washington State, observed 9 flying disc-shaped aircraft traveling at formation at high rate of speed. This sighting was the first. Many reports filtered down to J. Edgar Hoover since Franklin Roosevelt times, but they could only be attributed to some uneducated, poor people. Nobody paid attention to a hunter, to a farmer, until the fourth sighting was reported by the pilot. Incidentally, the similar situation I observed in the Soviet Union when I served for some 30 years as CIA head.
Well, the problem with trusting these people is when they come to the authorities, they are in a state of panic. By the time they calm down enough to talk about their frightening experiences, their protective friends and relatives convince them that they've been brainwashed. They go into a state of self-denial, convincing themselves that what they saw didn't really happen.
This is the same phenomenon that happens with extremely religious people when they've had a vision or seen an angel. It changes their lives and they realize that can never be the same.
With all due respect, we're not talking about visions. We're talking about UFOs, which are real.
So are their visions of God.
Once the media gets a hold of the story, they make it seem like the person who saw the UFO is crazy. Now, not too many people can withstand the infamy of being sold all over the front pages of newspapers and magazines.
What about the ones that go public?
Whitley Strieber, Bud Hopkins, and Ruth Montgomery have all written bestsellers. Of course, the establishment discredits them. Both Lee and Britt Ehlers have some incredible UFO videotapes, and they've published Billy Meyer's photos. Most scientists are extremely conservative, and we want to keep them that way. They come to us for the answers.
That's good for us. Otherwise, we would have a hell of a time to keep it all under wraps. Even as the Soviet Union, it's impossible. With Gorbachev, Glasnost, Perestroika.
Oh, I can just imagine what 60 Minutes would do with the story. Anyway, after the pilot story came out, public reaction bordered on hysteria. Then a local rancher reported a UFO crashed in Mexico, New Mexico, about 75 miles northwest of Roswell Army Air Base.
We recovered most of the wreckage. As a matter of fact, I think we've recovered all of the wreckage except for a few small pieces that the locals picked up. 4 small human-like creatures had ejected from the aircraft before it exploded. Unfortunately, by the time we discovered the bodies, they were badly decomposed from the elements and from predators, but we still had enough to examine.
How did you keep the news media out of it?
Now, in those days, the media didn't go after stories like bloodthirsty vampires. They knew their place.
I was on the base at the time, and I remember reading a front-page story about the UFO crash in the local Roswell newspaper.
Yeah, the story got out, but we put a stop to it right away. We told the news media that it was nothing more than a misguided weather research balloon, and they fell for it.
Their blood was a colorless, syrupy liquid with no red blood cells. Seemed as if they were constructed. Dr. Bong's team concluded that they weren't Homo sapiens, but some other life form.
Of course, aliens look different from us because they were all developed differently in their planet.
Some of them look quite human.
For many years, we found cave paintings and stone sculptures of extraterrestrials on every continent. The Hopis even modeled their Kachina dolls after them.
We already have enough top-secret video footage of UFOs and ETs to verify their existence.
Well, we had a devil of a time when one of our carriers saw UFOs. All the men were strongly warned to forget what they saw because it never happened.
We hushed over the 1975 incident in Maine at the Loring Air Force Base. The 2 men who had the alien encounter and lost their teeth made the local papers. But the 100-foot UFO was kept quiet until the damn Freedom of Information Act revealed it.
Our biggest problem right now is how to handle the news of all those perfect burnt-out circles where the UFOs landed on that farm in England. Now, every tabloid reporter in Great Britain has copies of photos of the field.
The ETs are waiting, I think, for our collective consciousness to expand before they contact us on any massive scale. But when people realize how exploited they are, law and order may become irrelevant. You can just push people so far.
I'm Wendell Stevens, retired Lieutenant Colonel, United States Air Force. I was...
元空軍大佐である彼は、軍に在籍当時より UFO 現象を研究し、現在まで多くの調査を行っている。UFO 研究家である彼の数ある調査の中でも、1978年、サウスカロライナ州チャールストンにおける UFO との遭遇事件は、そこに住むウィル・ヘルマン氏が UFO に連れ去られるというセンセーショナルな事実を報告している。その全容とは。
A case doesn't become real to me, though, until I have found independent corroborating evidence. Something that the original witness knows nothing about, hopefully from witnesses who know nothing about the other witness, the one I'm studying. Other things that have been seen or happened around him that he couldn't control. Now, if I find those things happening, then the case is clearly beyond his ability to fake. And then it becomes interesting to me, and I spend time and effort. One of the more interesting ones was a case that started in Charleston, South Carolina in 1978. involved Mr. William Herman, and he observed this light flying a strange triangular pattern. And the pattern was sharp angular turns with quick reversals up and down. And when he focused it in his binoculars and looked at the light, it zoomed in and filled the whole screen, the whole view in the binoculars. And that astounded him. It scared him. He thought it was going to hit him. He fell back and stumbled and thought he was falling. And when he looked around, he was in a beam of blue light and ascending up the beam of light into an object, the huge circular object that was filling the sky, 70 feet in diameter. And he lost consciousness as he reached the bottom of the craft and woke up sometime later on an examining table with strange creatures around him. He saw strange little men, and another one was standing at his shoulder and one by his foot, and one was operating a device. And they frightened him at first because he'd never seen any creatures like this before. It seemed to be making changes in his life, but it was also became a problem in his area because his church took a position that all UFO phenomena were manifestations of the Antichrist, that they were diabolic, and therefore he was in league with the devil, and it actually cost him his job several times. Most people will take a position, well, if the government says it isn't real, then it isn't real. And so it only travels in very small circles who are actually involved, who are already sworn to secrecy. We have substantial evidence that the Russians have captured vehicles and bodies. They're studying them at a place called Norilsk on the Yenisei River up above the Arctic Circle, northern part of Siberia. The Chinese have captured craft and bodies. I suppose that a number of other countries do have them too, but strangely, in a number of cases, we have managed to get the crash residue from other Western-oriented countries, not from China or Russia. Actually, I don't think our government is hostile to extraterrestrials. I think that they have had a desire to capture a live one and to capture a vehicle that's operational to study and try to duplicate. And I think it's as simple as that. I don't think we wanted to kill them. I think that we wanted to get their technology any way we could, and we seem to have gotten some.
I've been involved in investigative work all my life, 15 years private investigator. Last 10 years I've been involved in an investigation out of Switzerland involving a UFO case, a contact case. And I first got involved with this through a friend of mine, ex-Air Force man, Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens, retired Air Force military intelligence. He got me interested in the subject of UFOs, and fascinating subject. We've done a lot of work in that field. The Billy Meyer case involves a Swiss farmer. In 1975, his contacts began with extraterrestrials from a star system they named as the Pleiades. Mr. Meyer, what made the case so fascinating to us as investigators was the fact that Meyer was able to document through hard evidence most of his contacts and parts surrounding the Billy Meyer case. For example, he provided us investigators with not only the best photographs you've ever seen in 35 years of record keeping, but also movie footage, 8mm movie footage, sounds of the beam ship, the craft, over 40 witnesses.
So I've journeyed to Switzerland to see him, and I was invited to come back, and I stayed there for quite a period of time and got to know him quite well. And I guess you'd say I'm somewhat of an authority on Billy. Physically, he's like 5'8", 180 pounds, and a cheerful little guy that likes to watch the birds and gets up and appreciates nature. He's could remind you a little bit of something like what we think of Santa Claus. He's a happy little fellow that seems to make everybody feel like they're important. And the 20-some-odd people who live around Billy apparently have all been either handpicked or drawn there by the Pleiadians themselves because of their unique background and their incarnation chain, I suppose you might say. Well, I've always been skeptical of the pictures because who likes to be fooled? I would like to think that it's all real, but then I'd hate to wake up someday and find out, oh my gosh, Meyer was faking it all along, and I just never thought of how he did it. Personally, no, there's no doubt in my mind that he is a faker. I don't believe that at all. I believe his experiences are quite real. The pictures are not models. The pictures are very real. They've survived every computer test and every analysis anybody serious has ever done to them. And if you really want to get into all of his pictures, it will do nothing but prove that they are real. I don't think that the elders, Wendell Stevens, the people at Caltech, anybody that have ever examined them have had any reason to doubt them. Now, that doesn't prove that they're extraterrestrial. It just proves that on the film that there's a 21-foot metal object hovering out there floating in air, defying gravity. And that's as far as we can really take it until you and I get to go right in the ship and do it for ourselves.
The Meyer experience, the bottom line to it, after everything that's been written and everything that's been said over the past 10 years, it all boils down to one thing. I think Billy Meyer had an experience. He was allowed the opportunity, and I use the word allowed, to take these photographs. And these photographs were for one thing, for one reason, and one reason only, and that is to prove that we, humans, are not the only thinking beings in this universe. And I think that there is the bottom line to the Billy Meyer case. And these photographs now have been released worldwide through Japanese, through newspapers throughout the world. And if anything, it gets people to think. And that's what it's all about, just to think.
Now, Billy Myers, a farmer from Switzerland, was chosen by an extraterrestrial group from the Pleiades star system as their key spokesman on Earth. Now, he took the best photographs we've ever seen of UFOs. He says his mission is to release hard evidence given to him by the ETs. He has an entirely different version of the Jews as the chosen people.
Now, this is the type of information I'm concerned about. It undermines the very basis of traditional religions.
In fact, many ETs don't believe in organized religion.
We have been accumulating information for years. Now, people who have communicated with aliens usually wind up believing in God even more deeply, but they stop believing in their churches.
The problem is there are thousands of books already written about the UFO phenomena. It's impossible to keep information from leaking out, and people are starting to take the UFOs more seriously.
Luckily, the aliens and their ships look all different. So we challenge their description and spread their rumors and doubt about their existence.
The U.S. public thinks that all aliens have slanted Oriental eyes.
Maybe they'll think they're Japanese looking for real estate.
Gronk was the one who invented the name for them. Extraterrestrial biological entity.
The first E.T.
My grandkids think that Steven Spielberg invented aliens.
Mine too. Maybe we should ask him to join Majestic 12, huh?
So I do monsters, makeup, prosthetic, special effects for films.
スティーブ・ニール SFX 映画のメイキャップアーティストとして活躍する彼は近年友好的に描かれ始めた異星人について語る。悪から善へ変化の理由は何か。果たして MJ-12 は関与しているのか。
I look at the 50s stuff. It was definitely bad guys from space here to get us, and I really don't know why so many of the films were like that. And then all of a sudden, of course, at the end of all that, then we get things like Close Encounters and E.T., where they're happy and they're friendly and they're going to, take us out of starvation and give us higher technology. My favorite movie in the whole world is 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I think that film more than anything probably influenced my life. At that time, I was in high school, 68 when it came out, and it really had a big influence on me. And if you look at that film, you have aliens at the beginning of it influencing humanity, and all the way through it up to the end. And I think that film just says it all. I really do. People should go back and look at that.
My first picture was Star Trek The Motion Picture, the first Star Trek movie. Robert Wise was the director. Paramount, of course, produced it. Blade Runner was my second involvement with feature films. Aliens was the sequel to the Ridley Scott film. Jim Cameron was the director, and I was asked to think up the idea for the Sulaco. In the first movie, the same kind of ship was the Nostromo. Before that, between Blade Runner and Tron, were Short Circuit with John Badham directing, and 2010 with Peter Hyams at MGM. When I start a new job, and I do a lot of different things, airplane design, have done some leisure design emplacements in Japan that are being built. You have to pretend temporarily that you're very dumb and relearn each time around so that you never assume that you know everything about something. That's absolutely the worst professional mistake you can possibly make. Imagination is literally the fuel that keeps the human spirit alive. It has been all through history. Activating your imagination in whatever degree of elaborateness or whatever your profession is, whether it's chemical engineering, molecular biology, molecular electronics, or painting or design, is a way of just feeding the human spirit, the curiosity, and the need to know something. That's what keeps us activated. The world is not a predictable place. Unfortunately, I suppose misery will always be with us, but my futures that I elaborately illustrate or visualize, whether it's feature films or editorial art or whatever it happens to be, I just think it's a healthier and certainly more rewarding activity to rehearse for a very nice future than it is to, I'm not a nihilist. I think we have the technical ability and the social organizational ability to design our way into a very workable, very efficient, and very nice future.
Something happened to me after I first saw my first UFO, and I always wanted to be artistic. But after I had that experience, being artistic was very, very easy. It was a way of life for me, and therefore I used it the rest of my life. I became an artist, and I always wanted what it would be like living on another planet, and I've always had that question in my mind. And needless to say, that became my basis to my art form, to show the existence of possible, I think it's possible. There's certainly engineering sound. I've been building these colonies in these cities now for 13 years.
Dr. Vanneverbush concluded that the first UFOs were short-range reconnaissance craft and that they did not originate from any country here on Earth.
Some of the military thought that Stalin had ordered these experiments. However, the Russians were not technically advanced to pull something like that off. Now, when we questioned Werner von Braun, he said that Hitler had not ordered any such work on these kind of aircraft. However, he was very interested in UFOs.
He probably thought he could escape in a spaceship.
There was wide speculation at first that the UFOs came from Mars. The Mars project began when the Viking space probe discovered the Sea of Sidonia. There is a mile-tall, symmetrical face of a man carved in the rock. The man has on a helmet, and he's surrounded by pyramids.
So what do they really want?
The ETs see themselves as being here to assist us into our next step of planetary evolution. Now, we're trying to control the interaction between aliens and Earthlings, but their goal is to establish diplomatic relations. Now, right now, they're afraid we'll steal technology for military purposes.
They're not so far wrong, are they?
The stakes are high.
There are so many different ET groups with so many different agendas, maybe up to 150 groups. If there are a few destructive ETs, we can unite with all the other groups with good intentions to fight them off.
The extraterrestrials are worried about how we're handling our planet. how atomic testing is destroying the ozone layer.
They say there are parallel universes, and our nuclear testing is disturbing their civilizations. Chernobyl is a good example. It affected everyone on Earth in ways we aren't even aware of yet. You know, we're like babies with a book of matches.
Chernobyl contaminated the whole Ukraine valley, where, as you know, they grow most of the food. And that's one of the problems, beside the political turmoil they're facing all over the country.
Well, the aliens obviously believe that every planet has to go through a nuclear power phase in their development of consciousness before they can take their place in the intergalactic system. Unfortunately, some planets never make it past their nuclear stage and destroy themselves.
What they want is power. They want to take away our ability to control the planet. They want to destabilize everything we've worked so hard to achieve.
You know, we've managed to set the aliens up as being the bad guys to keep the public in fear. But you know as well as I do that, for the most part, almost all the extraterrestrials are good.
A lot better than us. Virgil Armstrong suggested if aliens come for you and you react with fear, they'll take you away. But if you tell them that they're violating universal law by interfering with your free will, then they'll release you unharmed.
We've been trying to ascertain their method of propulsion, where their power source comes from, and how it's transmitted. The UFOs don't seem to have any conventional method of guidance. Not only that, there's no internal wiring, vacuum tubes, electronics, or computer chips. Now, some of them use a form of magnetohydrodynamics to ionize the gases around the ship, causing it to glow many different colors.
What we couldn't do if we had the ability to build missiles like their ships, huh?
I think we have enough power to devastate the Earth as it is.
The best defense against war is a strong offense.
We have had a strong offense for 75 years and it has not kept us out of any wars.
Our missiles are the only thing that's kept the Soviets from messing with us. Otherwise, they'd have all of Europe by now.
Gentlemen, this isn't the 60s.
There have been several UFOs which have crashed in the past, but none recently. We surmise that our early forms of radar, which used high-intensity beams, fouled up their guidance system. God knows how bad the Russian radar was back then. We were emitting too much radiation in those days.
We've improved our radar, and they've improved their ships. A UFO was shot down over South Africa with a laser. We were right there to get the power system for study. For some reason, the ETs haven't retaliated.
Well, the first UFOs we found were made of an oil-like metal that formed a very malleable, tough coat. They were as light as balsa wood and had sort of a dull aluminum glint. They were as thin as aluminum foil, and they would straighten themselves out when they were crinkled up. You couldn't break them, and you couldn't cut them.
We've been trying to find other UFOs, but they rarely crash. When we vector in on them, they go up into hyperspace, they disappear, and then they reappear in another place.
We've shot at them, but our shells just flatten out on their shields. They never fired back or attacked us.
There have been UFO reports from every state in the country, including Alaska, Hawaii, even Puerto Rico. Virtually every nation has reported sightings, either officially recorded or as part of their national folklore.
A lot of myths say the aliens will come again. The Mayans had sophisticated astronomy and charted the planets. We make fun of folklore, but a lot of it is true.
David, these theories call into question our version of the creation of the universe.
Especially if there were human-like life forms before man.
God created man in his own image, not like some reptilian alien.
Maybe he doesn't look like us. We could be his biggest mistake.
And I don't think that calling into doubt the very existence of God is any laughing matter.
It isn't.
We're just laughing because there's a lot we just don't know about life.
A lot.
Nevertheless, we do have firm evidence of new UFO landings here in the U.S. in a dozen different locations.
We found one alien alive in a crash. Now, he lived until 1972 when he died of unknown causes.
People expect all aliens to look alike because we've conditioned them that they all come from one planet.
It's better to keep the public thinking in terms of black and white, us versus them. That way we can keep the concept of good and evil clear.
The aliens all look different because they come from different planets. A lot of them tend to have long arms which reach down below the knees. Their extremities are thin because they don't need to do manual labor, don't have to deal with as much gravity. Their heads are larger than ours. They have developed telepathic powers, so they don't need to communicate with words.
We've been studying the UFOs we have stored in Hangar 18. We even had one of them working in Pine Gap, Australia. It flew okay in our atmosphere, but as soon as we took it to space, it exploded. But I do really feel that we're making progress.
Extraterrestrials have found a way to reconstruct atoms. We're trying to duplicate the process.
Good.
You know, the biggest problem we have to deal with are people who claim to have talked to aliens or to have been taken away in their spaceships. They're getting just too much worldwide attention.
NASA once issued a directive making it illegal to talk to aliens.
It's becoming dangerous. Too many people know about the UFOs and are beginning to believe the evidence. Now, our spin campaign has been successful in convincing people that if they don't exist, that they're dangerous. Now, we could lose control of the situation, and it could lead to mass panic.